Hello. This exercise is going to be about voter disenfranchisement. And so voter disenfranchisement means that, when you have a policy or an action that might cause a certain group of people to not be able to vote, so making it more difficult to vote. It's been in the news recently. And I was looking around, and one state actually suggested the idea of you need to have a physical address in order to vote. So that means people who have P.O. boxes for their voter registration would no longer be eligible to vote. And that would be a huge issue in Alaska. If anyone has been to rural Alaska, you know that most people do not have physical addresses. But say you were asked to look into what are the implications from a policy that would require, physical addresses. And you've got to do some type of analysis to show who is going to be affected by this potential policy change. That is going to be today's question that we're going to explore. And so I'm not sure, which works better for people, but I have pulled out the questions that I would like you to answer for this exercise. So as you go through, I'd like answers to these questions. I also have kind of a guide here, step-by process of going through today's exercise in addition to the video. But you'll also find these questions buried in here in the red. So how many records do P.O. boxes have P.O. boxes in this AK voting data? You scroll through and you'll see here are these questions here, and they show up over here. I don't know, I was thinking that maybe when turning in your answers it might be easier to use this voting questions shortened document versus trying to embed them within the exercise outline. Okay, so both of them can be found on Blackboard. So enter student preview, go to course content, voting disenfranchisement, and I'll probably move that up a bit, and you'll see the voting exercise guide, which has some screenshots and step-by-step processes, and then you'll find the data, and I will upload the questions to here for you to answer. I believe I uploaded them, but they are not here, so I'll have to make sure that they get there. Odd. One thing is I do have this link for this SQL reference for queries. We're going to be doing a lot of queries today, and so you can click on it, and it just provides you some information as far as how to query your databases, because we're going to be doing some complicated queries here. So things like states, if you want to find all the states that start with MISS, that would capture Mississippi and Missouri. This is kind of the query that you would write in order to find that. We're kind of doing some Python coding today. So let's get on to our exercises. So we have our voting data. I'm going to, before I download that, let me check something here quick. Okay. The assignment here will actually pop up, I believe, on May 31st. So if we look at your syllabus, we see that you're going to start the voting disenfranchisement exercise on the 31st. So the assignment will pop up on the morning of the 31st. That's why you don't see it right now. Okay. All right. So download the data. Click on it. And if you don't have a voting folder made, let's make a voting folder. Save it there. I'm going to go to that folder and unzip it. Okay, you will see that we have two shape files. We have a shapefile for the borough. We have a actually census file that represents the zip codes. And then we have a CSV file. So I'm just going to double click on this CSV file and open it up in Excel. This is the Alaska Voter Registration Database. You can actually obtain the Alaska Voter Registration Database from the state of Alaska. And I'm just double clicking here to expand the columns so I can see them. Okay, so I see we have a street address, we have a mailing state, and we have a zip code. One quick way to just kind of look at this data is we could put some filters on it. So we could go up to data, filter, and now we have some filters up here. I can click on this state and I see there are actually a lot of registered voters that do not live in Alaska, which is kind of interesting. So if we're interested in looking at the number of voters and the percent of voters with P.O. boxes around the state, we're going to have to just only focus on these Alaska voters. So state equals AK. We're not going to do it here in Excel. We're going to all do it in ArcGIS. Just looking around here, just noticing the zip code. You have some 5 digits, some 9 digit. Another tip and trick is if you hold down the control button and the arrows, it will move around your database. So if I hit control and down, I stop at the first blank cell. So it's a way for me to check and see if there's empty cells in my database. And sure enough, you know, some people haven't put their address in. I'm going to go back up to the top, control arrow up. Going to go over to the mailing state, hit control arrow down. And some people didn't even put in their states. Lovely. Okay, so there are some blank cells here, so there are some issues there. And looking at the database, how many records long? It's 603,940, I believe, because Excel starts with 1, but it's a pretty big database. So control up takes me all the way back to the top. All right, so we just want to close this and we don't want to save it. So don't save at all. We're doing nothing with this Excel CSV file. All right, so start up your ArcGIS Pro. All right, I'm going to create a new map, and I'm going to call the project AK_voting. I'm going to go save it in my C projects location, C GIS projects, and I called it AK voting, and then I'll hit OK. Okay, so now I'm going to add the data that I downloaded. Go to C, GIS, voting, and just add all the files. And right away I notice it has the nasty projection of WGS84. I can tell that because Alaska looks like it has been squeezed like a Twinkie. It's very long, very short across the top. But that's okay, we're not doing any area or distance calculations right now, so we can leave it in this projection. Actually, it annoys me. I don't like it, and we're going to make a map later, so I'm going to change the projection of our map. So what you can do is you can right-click on Map and go to Properties and go to Coordinate Systems. And if you haven't set up your favorites for Alaska Albers, I would. Choose that. If you haven't, you can go to the search and search Albers, and you'll find it under Projected Continental North America, and it's the top one, and then hit OK. There, I'm so much happier. Okay, now we can see the state of Alaska. I'm going to make this boroughs empty, just the outlines. So you can either double click on this, or you could go to properties, or you could go to symbology, right click and go to symbology. I'm just going to double click on the pink blob here, and then go over here and then click on black outline. Okay, and then I'm going to move this to the top so it kind of displays on top of my zip codes. So I'll zoom in a little bit, and so these are zip codes for the state of Alaska. So I'll right click and I'm just going to go label. And so I actually used to live in 99701. It looks like the University of Alaska might have its own little special zip code up there. Indeed it does. 99775 is the UAF zip code. Okay, it's kind of cute. Alright, so we see that this is a zip code. We'll notice just in looking at it that I don't see any 9-digit zip codes. All of these are 5-digit zip codes. So that's something that will become important. Alright, so let's turn off the labels because it'll get kind of messy. So right click on your layer and hit label. You'll notice that this right now is has a blue box around it. When we click on it, it'll turn it off and the blue box is gone, so it's not selected. Alright. So I would recommend that you test yourself and see, when we're asking these questions, see if you can write down what are the steps it would take to answer the question. So our question is, we want to figure out if this requirement for having a physical address will negatively affect certain areas of Alaska, which means areas with a higher percentage of P.O. boxes are going to be disenfranchised. So ultimately, we would like a map that shows the percentage of registered voters that have P.O. boxes, and we're going to add a communities layer later, and we'll say what communities are going to be the hardest hit. So see if you can outline the steps that it would take to answer that question, knowing that we have a spatial zip code layer, we have our voter registration database, which has our address, which does have a P.O. box right here, and later we will add a communities point file. Okay, so see if you can figure that out. If not, no worries, we're going to do it now. Alright, so the first thing is we have our voting data here, and remember we noted that we only want state of Alaska registered voters. So one of the things is ArcGIS does not like CSV files. Notice we can't select by attributes. We can't really do anything with a CSV file. First step is we have to convert it into a DBF, which is the type of table that ArcGIS likes. So we are going to right click and we're going to go down to data and we're going to go to export. And I'm going to navigate to my folder, my C folder, and then my GIS, voting, and I'm going to call this AK voting data. I'm going to say .dbf. Okay, AK underscore voting underscore data .dbf. Hit save, and then hit OK. ArcGIS will be much happier with this DBF file. Okay. Alright, so now we can just get rid of this CSV file. We don't need it. Keep our workspace clean. Alright, let's open up this new file. Okay, so there are some roadblocks for us to do our analysis. One thing is, you'll notice that there's no nice field to try to flag which mailing addresses are P.O. boxes. So we're going to have to figure out how to do that. Looking at this, we have they typically start with P.O. box but they're not all nice and neat like that. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is we need to get rid of the non-Alaska voters. So select by attributes, and we want to select when the mailing state does not equal to Alaska. Does not equal Alaska, AK. And hit apply. The difference between apply is this window stays open. The difference between OK is the window closes. So I don't care. You could hit OK. In this case, we're done with it. All right, so now I see I have Virginia selected, Oregon, Idaho, Colorado, and we want to get rid of these. We don't want these in our analysis. So we would note, if we were writing a paper, we would note that we removed 36,890 records because these were registered voters outside of the state of Alaska. That would go into the methods of your paper. So, but here we're going to hit delete. All right. Then go up to table, or sorry, go up to edit and hit save, because we need to save our changes. If you don't save your changes, you won't be able to do anything else. You'll be like, why can't I add a field? Well, you didn't save. All right, so now we're saved. Now I would like you to add a couple of fields, because first we're going to have to make a field where we can identify that we do have a P.O. box, and we're going to have another field that we kind of use as a temporary field so that we could strip out this P.O. box identifier here. So I'm going to add two fields. I'd like you to add two fields. One of the fields that I want you to add is called P.O. box. P.O. underscore box. P.O. underscore box. Okay, and leave this alone, because we're actually going to use this field, and we're going to put a 1 if they do have a P.O. box, a 0 if they do not have a P.O. box. So we'll just leave it that and along. And then we're going to add another field that's called flag with a capital F. This is where we're going to kind of use our temporary field, the flag, and where we're going to strip out that P.O. box in the mailing address. And this one we will actually call a text, and we'll make it a length of 10. Okay. Then click anywhere, click back here, and then go up to save. So our first step is, in thinking spatially, is I got to figure out how can I flag each record as a P.O. box and not a P.O. box. Well, to do this, as I mentioned, we've got to strip out this first part of box, identify it, and then have another field here where we can flag it with 1s or 0s. So ultimately, we can add up the number of P.O. boxes by our zip codes. Okay. One of the things is that we kind of got to figure out what we have to query. So my guess is, just having dealt with data, this is messy. It's not everything is going to be P.O. box. So let's sort this by mailing address. Right click on it and say sort ascending. It'll take a while to sort because we're dealing with, you know, over 500,000 records. One thing I'm already seeing, some people did not provide their mailing addresses. Okay. So, okay, I'm looking here. It's going to sort numbers first, or odd characters first, but I'm just going to drag down here, and I want to just do some looking where they start to have letters. So I'm just dragging down to where we get to letters here. Let me make this bigger. Okay, so, all right, we see a number of P.O. box here. P.O. box, all sorts of stuff. 1989. So lots of different P.O. boxes. Okay. So I want to rip off this first part called P.O. box. Okay? So in order to do that, we're going to have to do a calculate field and do some Python coding. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the first 6 characters, and spaces count as a character. So P-O space B-O-X. That's 6 characters. So what I'm going to have you do is right-click on flag and go to calculate field. And we want to rip off the first 6 characters of this mailing address. So in your flag, type mailing address. And then bracket 0, colon, 6, close bracket. So that says I want you to only select the first 6 characters of the field called mailing address. And then click OK. So you're coding, you're doing some Python coding. This is kind of how I started to learn Python coding, was playing with the field calculator and different types of queries and stuff. I don't know. I'm geeky, I find it fun. Okay, so we'll see, looking at it, yes indeed, we have stripped off the first characters here. If I go down to the end where I kind of had the P.O. boxes, it doesn't crash my system here. Okay, yep, it did indeed strip off P.O. Box. I guarantee you that some people have done some really weird things with P.O. Box. So I want to see if I can get a unique summary table of this new flag column to see how P.O. Box might have been spelled. So to do that, you right click, and remember we can go to summarize. So let's summarize by this flag field. And you really can click anything. Let's do state. We know that the states are all equal to AK, so we just sure the maximum, and then hit OK. What this is going to do is it always adds a frequency column. Whenever you do summary statistics, it adds a frequency column, so that will give us a unique list of our flag variables and a count. So we have this AK voting data statistics. Now let's open it. And so there's 94,589 unique records. All right, and I'm going to go down to the end of this numbers mess. We're getting there. Okay, so we're close. All right, so I see that we have a number of places where we just have box. Well, people forgot to put PO. I'm sure that these boxes are also PO boxes. So when we do our query, we're going to have to select for anything that starts with BOX. Okay. And we're going to then, if we go scroll down, just keep going. Just looking at things. Down to maybe where the P's are for PO. Yes. So we are going to have to select for P, a number 0, dot, space B, P, O, B, O, P dot 0 dot 1. I mean, this is a 0 and this is an O. So as you can see, this database is not cleaned up very well. And so ultimately you would like to select for all of these instances here. What I probably would do is, I would highlight all the ones that we're going to have to select for and build these into my queries. And fortunately you don't have to do that. I've done this for you. But this is just to emphasize database management and cleaning up data. Spell things the same way, because when you go to query your records, you're going to run into problems if you have a space, say, after P.O. Box, or you forgot to put a space between P.O. Box. They will show up differently. So we're going to have to deal with this right now. All right, so just clear the selection here on the statistics table. This was just to show what a mess our PO box looks like. All right, so now we need to do a query where we find kind of this messy data, different ways that PO box is spelled. So go to select by attributes, and we are going to go flag and click this SQL here. This is going to need to do a complex query here. All right. And so if you go to that voting exercise document on page 10 or page 9, I would like you to copy and paste and put in my query here that I've done. So basically we're like, okay, if flag is equal to PO box, or if the flag column is equal to P space O space BO, or all of these. The one unique one is this flag like box. So this will select any records that start with BOX. So this dollar sign is kind of the wild card operator in ArcGIS. So once you have pasted this in, hit OK. Hit OK. And so this is now selecting the records where people have put a PO box multiple different ways. All right, so now that we've identified these, we want to put a value of 1 for voters who have a PO box. So right click on the PO box column, calculate field, and now delete and put a 1. And then hit OK. So we're making progress here. Okay, so let's look at our selected records. Go down here and say show selected records. And indeed we do have a value of 1, so we are happy. Okay. Now it's still going. Okay. So while this is loading, one of the other things is, now that we've got this done, I'm looking at my mailing zip code, and this is what this looks like. Thinking, what are the next steps? So once we use this database to count up the number of voters and the number of voters with PO boxes, we've got to somehow link it to our spatial data. So one of the things is, let's look at our spatial data and its attributes. So go to your shapefile of the census areas and let's look at the attributes and let's compare them side by side. So click, drag, go right there and let go, snap. All right, so mailing zip code, and in this census information, this ZCTA 5CE20, that's the zip codes. So this is the zip codes and this is the zip codes. You notice we sort of have a problem. We need to get this mailing zip code here in our voting data to 5 digits. So we need to strip off this last like -1175 in order for it to match over here. So we're going to have to create a column in our voting data that's called zip code that's going to be able to allow us to join this voting data to our spatial. So hover over the zip code and we're going to notice it's a text field and it's 5 long. So we need to create a text field that's 5 long called zip code. Alright, so close down that attribute table. We don't need it anymore. Clear your records. Go to show all. And once this comes back, we're going to add a field here called zip code. Alright, so add a field. Capital ZIP, capital COD, EIP, capital COD, and we call it text, and we call it 5. Tip and trick is I just use my tab to tab through things here. That's the quick way. And then hit save. So, like before, we're going to do kind of some little Python coding to rip off the first, it's really 6 characters of our zip code. So right click on zip code, go to calculate field, delete the 1 there, double click on your zip code column, and then again bracket 0 colon 6 bracket, and then hit apply, or actually just hit OK, that's fine. And I mean, when you're off doing your own stuff, you know, usually I have to say, okay, 0 to 4, does that work? 0 to 5, yeah, it's still cutting it off. 0 to 6, so you might have to sit there and play with exactly what that should be, because I always don't quite remember. Sometimes the first character is a 0, counted as 0. Sometimes it's counted as 1. But after doing some work, this is what works. So we can see we ripped off the zip code. Go down to some places that had this, and okay, I'm not seeing that dash there, so I know I've captured the first 5 digits that I want. Great. We're almost ready to do our summarizing. So one thing we still need to add is a field called Pres. Lots of times when I'm doing summarizing of data, I have a field called Pres because then I can add up and figure out what are my total number of records. In this case, our total number of records are going to be the total number of voters. So this P.O. box field, this will count up the voters with a P.O. box. We need the way to count up the total number of voters. So go to add and type Pres, and keep it along. Pres long, and then go up to save. Okay, it's saved. Close that down. Now let's populate this new Pres field with a value of 1 so that we can add it up. Right click, calculate field, delete that, and just put value of 1, and then hit OK. All right, so now we're to the point where we can summarize. What we want to do is we want to summarize by this zip code field, because this zip code field now will match our spatial data. We want to count up the total number of voters and then the total number with P.O. box. So right click on zip code and go to summarize. And so we're going to summarize by zip code. And the fields that we want to summarize are our Pres, and we want to do the sum, and we want to do our P.O. box, and we want to do the sum. And I am going to call this, I believe it was AK voting tallies is what I'm going to call this. I'm just going to keep it in my geodatabase here. That's fine. AK voting tallies, and then click off of it somewhere. So this is my tally of number of voters and number of voters with P.O. boxes. And then hit OK. Make sure nothing's selected here. OK. Alrighty, so I'm closing this table down and looking at our new summary table. Okay, so we have a new summary table. 26 people did not report a zip code, so that's something that, again, you would put in your methods that you didn't have a zip code for that. You can sort. One thing I wanted to point out is this frequency and the sum of the Pres are the same. So, you know, I didn't really have to add that Pres column, but I just like to be double sure. The frequency is also going to be the total number of counts for records. So if I scroll down here, you know, 857, these two are going to be the same. This is just the total number of records, or in this case, the total number of voters by a zip code. And then your P.O. box is going to be how many had P.O. boxes. So in this zip code, almost all of them. only 3 people did not have a P.O. box. And so you might be like, oh, where is this zip code 99522? Well, we can't really figure that out with our table here. It's not spatial. We could open this up and then go and try and search in this and see where it is, but that's a pain in the butt. It'd be better to just link the databases together, and that way it's all in one spot, and you can make pretty maps. So I do have some questions for you on this. I would like you to use your sorting opportunities here and tell me which zip code has the most voters, which would be this column here, and which has the most voters with a P.O. box, which would be the highest value in your sum of the P.O. box. Okay, so I'm going to hit clear here. One of the things we're interested in is the percent of voters that have P.O. boxes. So we need to add a field in here that's going to be the percentage, which will be the total number of voters with P.O. boxes divided by the total number of voters. So we're going to add a field, and we're going to call it PER capital P.O. box, so percent P.O. box. And if you wanted to do the alias, you could be like percent with P.O. box. And we want this to be a double because it's a percentage and it will have decimal points. So then hit save. All right, so since we're going to be dividing by this frequency or the sum of pres, either one, we need to check and see if there are any zeros in it. You can't divide by a zero. So sort ascending and go up to the top of your database, and there are no zeros. So we don't have the problem of the error, you've divided by a zero, boo. We're good. So we need to calculate the percent here. So click on this column, right click, and go to field calculate. And so we need to put a parenthesis first, and we're going to take the total number of voters that have a P.O. box divided by the total number of voters, and then click in here and close your parenthesis, multiply by 100. For this multiply, you can either click the asterisk up here or the asterisk on your keyboard, either way. And then hit OK. Alrighty. So I'm going to sort this descending, because if I have any values over 100, something has gone wrong. So it's just a way to double check your data to make sure things are working right. So in fact, yes, we do. Okay, so close this down. Actually, I'm going to leave this open. Open up your census table. Alright, I'm going to drag this tallies and put it here so I can see both at the same time. So our fields in common are our zip code according to the census data and our zip code in our summarized data set. We want to take and join this information onto our census data so that we can spatially look at things and eventually bring in the communities and overlay the communities with these census areas to figure out which census areas have the highest voter disenfranchisement and which communities would that be. So I'm going to close down this tallies. Notice our last column in here is this interpol on 20. Basically the latitude and longitude. Alright, so to do this we're going to do a join. Make sure that your census table is open and then highlighted there, and then go up to table and joins and add a join. Alright, so our input table is going to be our census. The table that we're doing the joining from is our tally table. And it was smart enough to know that this is the zip code for the census data. You see it right here. And in our voting tallies, it was that column called zip code. And so, no idea what this is. It's not indexed. That's fine. We're not dealing with huge amounts of data, so that's fine. So then just hit OK. And you'll see table of columns start to pop up here. There we go. So we've got it. So now we've got our percent of voters with a P.O. box and total number of voters. Great. One thing is joins in this manner are not permanent. This is a temporary join. If I don't know, I'll just do it to show you. Let's see. Let me remove this. And I'll add it back on now. Look at the attribute table. It's gone. So we've lost our join. That's because it's temporary. That's okay. I can just do it really quick here again. You guys don't have to mess around like that. Alright, so if we want to permanently keep our new shape file that has our information about voting, we need to export it. So right click on it and go down to Data, Export Features, navigate to your GIS folder here. Okay, just looking at what I called it here. Thought we called it the same thing. Alright. I called it Alaska underscore census underscore 2020 underscore zip codes data. One hack that you can do, because I just hate typing, is I can actually click on this shape file here, steal most of the name of it, come down here and click at the end, and then just put underscore voting. And then all I had to type was underscore voting. And then hit save. And then hit OK. It will automatically add to your project. So I'm going to turn off this other Alaska zip codes, close this down, and now I should have my data. So I'm going to symbolize it so I can see it. So right click and go to symbology. I'm going to do graduated colors because we're dealing with a percentage here, and make sure I choose % PO box. And I'm going to choose like from yellow to red. And the red indicates a high percentage of voters with P.O. boxes. All these colors in the background are distracting. I don't really need to see this. So I'm going to change my base map to gray, just so things pop a little more. So a light canvas gray. Okay. And so, yeah, I'm kind of seeing some patterns here. We've got lighter colors here in the urban areas, a lot of red. Out in the rural areas, you can see the little pockets of Prudhoe Bay here. This one might be Utqiagvik, but you know, that's my next question is, I want to know how this relates to communities. So we need to find a database of communities. So go to whatever browser you use. I happen to use Google, or sorry, Firefox, and I'm going to search for Alaska Communities GIS. And of course the State of Alaska GeoPortal pops up as #1. Okay, I mentioned this is one of the biggest geospatial data warehouses in Alaska. And on the search bar, I'm going to search for communities. You'll notice there's a bunch, 785 community databases. All sorts of interesting things here. Communities served by school, threatened. The one that we really want is this Communities Incorporated. And just knowing Alaska data, I know it's by the Department of Commerce and Community, so I can actually hit that, apply, and it will reduce my data set to, wow, 643. Fortunately, I know what I want, so I'll scroll down until I find this Communities Incorporated and Unincorporated Cities, Boroughs. One note is that this data set more than likely includes communities that no longer really exist. So think about that when doing your analysis. I have my own special communities database that I've put together that excludes communities that no longer exist. Like, I was just looking, Cannon Village. I have never heard of Cannon Village. I don't know if people actually live there anymore. Just looking around. I'm not sure if anyone lives in Flat, actually. So something to keep in mind. All right, so now we go to download. Go down to shapefile and download the previous generated file. If you try to do the latest one, it takes forever and sometimes often does not work. This is a cached file here, and so it's much faster, and usually they're not that old. So download it and go to your CGIS voting. And a horrible name, but I'll say save. And then go to it. And I'm going to extract it here. And that really is a very horrible name for a shapefile. So I actually might change the name of this because it's just, that's data management, data management. If this was a file that I was actually going to save, I would not want it named like that. So let's go back to our ArcGIS. And let's view our catalog pane. And now go to favorites. And you should have your C on there. I never really use my C, so I actually don't have it, so I'm going to have to add the folder connection. How bad am I? Okay. Alright, so now the C drive, I can go to anything on the C drive, and I can go to GIS. I can go to voting, and there's the horribly named file. I can right click on it and I can say rename, and I just call it communities all, and then hit enter. Alright, I've named it to something nicer. Now I can click and drag and add it to the project. And now I can get rid of this. It's gonna auto hide. Okay, so now I have my communities overlaid with my census, or my zip codes. Alright, so now that we've had that, what I'd like you to do is go to your census file here, right click and open it, and let's figure out what is the zip code area that has the highest percentage of PO boxes. So go to the last column and sort descending, and we see that it is this one. I see it highlighted right there. And so say we're like, well, what is the community that's within there? I mean, it's easy enough. It has one. We could do this non-spatially. But, you know, say it was something like this one next to it that had multiples to it. So in order to, you know, figure out this question, it's a spatial, selected by a spatial location. So spatially, we want to figure out what communities are spatially located within this selected polygon. So with this row selected, we're going to go up to select by location. And our selecting features are actually going to be our zip codes voting. So this file here, so this polygon that's highlighted, you can see one is highlighted, is going to select the communities that intersect with the highlighted polygon. Okay? So hit apply. Alright, so it did it. And so now let's open up the attribute table for our communities and see what was selected. I can see that there's one record selected. I can show that single record, and it's Healy Lake. Okay, Healy Lake is in the area where it had the highest percent of voters for a zip code that were disenfranchised. Had the highest percent with PO boxes. Okay, so I actually ask you that in the guide, and as a bonus for extra credit, you kind of use the same steps. See if you can figure out, if I was interested in finding all the communities that were within zip codes that were 90% or above as far as the percentage of PO boxes, which communities are within zip codes that have 90% or more of their voters with a P.O. box. See if you can figure that out and answer that question. Okay, so the final step then is for you to make a map. You can have some artistic freedom here to make a map, but the goal of the map is to show voter disenfranchisement and what it looks like around the state. So you go to Insert and you go to New Layout. And for Alaska, I usually do the letter one just because it is so long. And then Insert Map. And I can insert it here. Click and drag. And then if I want to change the zoom, I right click and go to Activate. And I can zoom in and out. And then go back to Layout. And then you can add things like your legend. Click on legend, and then click and hold and draw a box. And oh my goodness, look at how many decimal points I have. Horrible. So we can go over to our Alaska Census and we can right click on it and go to Symbology. Go up to Advanced Options, Format Labels. And really we'll do 1. There we go. And you know, it's up to you what you all would like to display. Notice if I change the names here, I can put here % of voters. Actually, I think I would PO. Whoops. The thing that I'm pointing out is when I update this, it's going to update this up here. So if I click off of it, notice how that changed. You can right click on this layer called % of PO Box right here, and you can go to Properties. And here, the layer name this is the layer name, this is the headings, and these are the labels. So if I check off heading, this heading will disappear right here. I don't really need to show both of them, depending on how I label this, so I'm going to turn that off. Alright. I can also do indents here, so the classes can be indented. See how that just moved this in? So it's nice and nested underneath there. One of the things, Alaska_boroughs, I hate it when I see people and they haven't really cleaned up their legend. So rename this to be just, say, boroughs. Okay. Notice the big size difference among these. So what you can do is you can click on communities and say click on boroughs, both of them highlighted, hold down the control, right click and go to properties. You can go to text symbol, go to appearance, and then just make them all one size, 16. Now they're the same size, but you can start to go in and play with things. So now they're both the same size, but say if we wanted to oh, I should have also selected that one. So communities, PO Box, and boroughs. Right click, sorry, properties. Text symbol, make them 16. Hit apply. Okay. Notice how it made the labels also 16. But say if I wanted the labels to be slightly smaller, I could click off over here and go specifically to this label, this layer, go to properties, and then I could go to item and go down to labels. So now I'm just going to edit the labels for this layer called % of PO Boxes. And here I could change it to say 12. And then go down and hit apply, and you'll notice it made those smaller. Some other tips and tricks is if I just click back, now I'm back to the whole legend in general, and say I wanted to have a background here so I could see it easier, I can click on this display, and here I get the option for background, and I could give it a color like white. Sometimes it's nice to have a little gap, to give it a little bit of buffer, and that's where you play with this gap. Notice how it's making that big buffer around it. That's kind of crazy. I'll just go back to 1. And If you want to have some nice rounding to it, right now it's square, but if you wanted to put in some rounding, go for it. So now it's kind of rounded. Lots of things. I could teach a whole lesson on how to make maps. Cartography is what it's called. Okay, so we have that, and you know, I probably would go to my legend and go to properties, and I would strongly suggest that you give it a title. So click here and show a title, and just don't call it legend, please. Don't. We could say percent of Alaska voters that hold a PO box. And I think this is last year's data, so we could say 2022. I'll click off of it, but notice it does wrap it for you. One thing I'm annoyed at is I have partial capitalization, so I should either have everything capitalized or not. So I'll go back to properties here, and V is lowercase. Okay. And you can also just make this bigger by dragging it. All right. The other thing is always have your name. So put this insert rectangle text. I could put created by Jen Schmidt. And I could say date, May 18th, 2023, and click off of it. And then you can go up to share, export, save it sure as a JPEG, navigate to your folder, see, voting. I can say Schmidt voting map, hit enter. Oh, it went away. See, sorry, GIS voting, and then hit save, and then don't forget to hit export. And now you have saved your map that you can then insert into the Word document. And I noticed that percent of Alaska cores. So I need to change that. Properties. Voters. That. And then I can just go through the process again. Export. Just click on it to override it. Hit export, and yes. All right. So that is your voting franchise disenfranchisement exercise. Good luck.